Here's your wrestling news for December 28th, 2022, and we're kicking off today with Bobby Lashley, who was fired recently for putting his hands on a WWE official, though that termination was later reversed. The Almighty's profile was even moved to the alumni section on WWE.com before Adam Pearce issued an apologetic video in which he stated that Lashley was no longer fired, but that there would still be repercussions. Lashley is now once again a WWE superstar and made his in-ring return at a recent WWE live event. At an untelevised event in Atlanta, Lashley got one of the biggest pops of the night, as well as a win against Omos in a WrestleMania 38 rematch. It's interesting that Lashley faced Omos at the show, as it was during the December 19th Raw that MVP, Omos' manager, teased reuniting the Hurt Business during a discussion with Pearce. It remains to be seen whether Lashley will return to the ring for next week's first Raw of 2023, but as this live event showed, the former WWE champion hasn't lost a step despite his recent in-ring absence. This past Monday, WWE hosted their annual Boxing Day show in Madison Square Garden, but this wasn't the only show around. That same night, WWE held an event in Columbus, Ohio, but that show did not live up to anyone's expectations. Fightful Select reports that the Columbus show is being considered a logistical mess behind the scenes thanks to travel issues that forced several changes. Seth Rollins and Becky Lynch were both advertised for the show, but neither was able to make it, and there were loud "We Want Rollins" chants throughout the night. Bobby Lashley and Columbus's own Alexa Bliss also had to miss the event due to incredibly poor weather, and it was said that several more had to rush to even make it to the show. WWE live events are usually a more relaxed time, as the superstars are able to have fun and do things they'd never do on TV, but this week's house show in Columbus was anything but an easy night. Over to AEW, as CM Punk is a two-time world champion, but his reigns didn't exactly live up to the hype. Punk's first reign was disrupted due to injury, while his second was ruined by Punk's comments and actions after All Out, but now we're learning more about his run on top. Speaking on the debut episode of the FTR podcast, Dax Harwood, a close friend of Punk, refuted the idea that the Chicago-made star had any reason to join AEW other than to put on great matches. In fact, Harwood added that Punk admitted that he never wanted to be champion, but just wanted to have fun, and would often treat the talent to dinner because he was that happy. Of course, Punk would not stay happy for good and would have his infamous incident at All Out, something Harwood recalled on his show. Harwood explained that he was laying in bed in his hotel room when he got a text from a wrestler asking if the reports were true, but Dax had no idea what he meant. Immediately after, Harwood got a call from Punk, who explained the situation, and at first, Harwood thought that this was some rib by the then AEW World Champion. Punk would then FaceTime Harwood to show how serious he was, and Harwood immediately offered to come and help his friend, a request Punk turned down, saying, "It's died down, we're good." Things would not be good, as Punk believed, and when asked about what he believes to be the truth, Dax said only God knows, but said that some reports had elements of truth, while others raised a red flag. Harwood even insinuated that some journalists with a grudge against Punk will have been biased in the reporting, but gave no names or examples. We'll likely never know for certain what really happened on that fateful September night, but Punk isn't expected to return to AEW, which comes as good news to those who have refused to work for him, and bad news for his friend Dax Harwood. At WWE's Madison Square Garden live event, the show saw a 5-man Intercontinental title ladder match, which didn't quite go as planned. In one spot, Santos Escobar had a scary bump after Kofi Kingston landed hard on his knee with a double stomp from the top of a ladder. A referee checking on Escobar threw up the X sign to signal that he was not selling, and the Legado del Fantasma leader was seen being helped to the back by officials after the match. In an update from PW Insider, it is reported that Escobar is okay after taking that bump, and that it was Jamie Noble who steadied him for his walk to the back. The report added that while it looked like Noble was holding him up, Escobar was able to walk under his own power, and it is not expected that he will miss any TV time. Santos Escobar risked serious injury this past Monday, and he's lucky to be okay, and it goes to show that injuries in wrestling can happen at any time. Next week, Sasha Banks will make her debut for New Japan after reportedly leaving WWE in June of this year. Banks' career at WWE came to a controversial and secretive end, and there was recently a big mistake at a WWE live event. As a fan who attended the Atlanta house show reported, WWE were selling programs at the show which featured Banks on the top left corner of the cover. That fan did clarify that this is most likely a program made long before Banks' departure from WWE, and we're sure that new ones will not include the former women's champion. Banks' arrival in New Japan has led to speculation that she could be heading to AEW, but she's still viewable in WWE, at least on the programs. One name who is in AEW but isn't being used is Miro, who hasn't competed in close to 4 months for the company. Miro's most recent match was at All Out in September, and even his involvement with that show was a random addition, and it's been much longer since he's had an actual feud. Speaking to Grapsody this week, Cain addressed Miro's absence, comparing it to the NFL and NBA, saying there is simply too much AEW talent to fit into 3 hours. That may be the reasoning that Cain is sticking with, but on his Jim Cornette podcast, the veteran manager suggested that Miro's wife CJ Perry cost him opportunities for recently stating that he'll return to WWE one day. If I was Tony Khan, I would simply sit down with the guy and say, okay, we wanted you to be on TV and beat some people and get some heat on a guy and go to the pay-per-view and do the job with whoever this was. And depending on who it was, I could be offended by the idea or not. If you wanted to do a job for Orange Cassidy, Pockets, I don't blame him for saying If it was for Bryan Danielson or whoever, that might be a different story. Then I would see if he had an idea. If he had an idea and it was in any way palatable to me, I'd try to work it in. Maybe not after Lana's comments, but with the situation that has existed so far. Miro is a former TNT champion, but the past year to 18 months have not been good for him, and time will tell when, if ever, he gets featured in AEW again. In March of this year, Cain Velasquez was arrested after allegedly opening fire on an occupied vehicle, which he believed contained someone accused of molesting his son. Velasquez faces 10 charges, the most serious of which being attempted murder in the first degree, and spent much of 2022 behind bars. Earlier this month, a $1 million bail was set and Velasquez was freed, and during the latest Keepin' It 100 podcast, the UFC legend spoke about the support he has received. Yeah, man, I did see the support I got from the wrestling and MMA communities, and I just want to thank everyone. I truly appreciate everyone's support in all of it. It means so much to me. It gave me a lot of strength when I was in there. So yeah, dude, I feel it, and I just want to thank everybody forever for that. When asked about being freed, Cain admitted that he was in two minds to it, as well it seems like a positive, he was in a bad place mentally. My mind ran like both sides of it, being positive about getting out versus thinking he'd be serving time straight through. The bad side and the good side, it's a thing. We always have to have faith, It doesn't matter what position we're in, where we're at, we always gotta look for the best case scenario for us and just know that our lives are something much bigger, and it's all gonna work out for the best, always. They had me in protective custody, it was very low-key, only a few people that I was able to kind of hang out with, and I guess the good thing about it is, you got a lot of alone time with yourself, and the bad thing about it was, you got a lot of alone time with yourself. Cain was also granted permission by Santa Clara courts to compete at a AAA show, on the condition that he arranged for law enforcement to be there, and spoke about the event. It was crazy, man, probably the worst I've ever felt physically, mentally doing something. I feel like there was such a standstill, my body and my mind. For 8 months, just a low way of thinking versus when you're out there competing. It's a different way of thinking, how your brain and your mind have to be firing, so I felt like I was probably in the worst case scenario for myself that I've ever been in, and I feel like I always do this. I put a lot of pressure on myself, and I just want to be ready when I go out there and, compete. And when I went out there and did it, dude, it was... Velasquez concluded by saying he still has plans in wrestling and has even spoken to Daniel Cormier about doing something with AAA, but that all hinges on the very serious court case he's facing going in his favor. And we're ending with Erick Rowan, whose imposing frame made him one of the most physically threatening superstars during his WWE tenure, but that couldn't save him from being released in April 2020. Since then, Rowan has made appearances elsewhere, including a handful for AEW, and this week opened up about his injuries in WWE. Speaking to Wrestling News, Rowan discussed suffering a torn bicep at SummerSlam 2018 and the little time WWE gave him to recover. All the times I got injured and you saw me off WWE TV was because I was having surgeries. Every time I was off TV for a period of time, it was because I was having a surgery. You never saw cameras around me. No, I was by myself at the hospitals getting the surgery, flying back home, miserable, and doing the rehab every day, sometimes twice a day. Nobody ever talks about it. I remember when the Bludgeon Brothers, when we had won at SummerSlam, I tore my bicep. They gave me one day off so I could hopefully deal with the pain, and then we did a SmackDown versus the New Day where we used ladders and all sorts of stuff. In the meantime, I don't have a right bicep that's attached to my arm, but I've never made a story out of it. Given his work at AEW, especially since Brody Lee's passing, many feel that the former SmackDown Tag Champion could be All Elite soon enough. But with treatment like this, don't expect Rowan back in WWE anytime soon.